She's here, Elena whispered, staring at the photograph floating 3 feet above the concrete floor. Detective Torres froze, his gun still aimed at the nun's head. That's impossible, he breathed, watching the image of a 9-year-old girl glow brighter with each passing second. Then the dead priest stepped through the steel door, smiled, and said the 5 words that would destroy 15 years of murder and cover-ups. Hello, Raymond. We need to talk. Hello, my amazing family and friends. I'm so glad you're here with me again today. If you're ready to dive into another powerful story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling me the country or city you're watching from. And guess what? Tomorrow, I've got another story lined up that will leave you just as captivated, so don't miss it. Now, let's get started. She's asking for you again, Officer Reynolds whispered, his voice barely audible above the institutional buzz. Says she won't speak to anyone else. Not the chaplain, not her lawyer, just you. Catherine's fingers found the silver cross at her throat, a gesture as automatic as breathing after 37 years of service. Through the reinforced glass window, she could see Elena Vasquez sitting perfectly still on the narrow cot, her dark hair falling like a curtain around shoulders that bore burdens no 28-year-old should carry. The execution was scheduled for midnight, less than 6 hours away. Elena had been on death row for 3 years, convicted of a crime that had shocked the nation and divided opinions across every dinner table in America. But something about this young woman had always troubled Catherine, something that went deeper than the headlines and court transcripts. Sister. Officer Reynolds shifted uncomfortably. The warden needs to know. Will you see her? Catherine studied Elena through the glass. The young woman's lips were moving silently, and even from here, Catherine could see the tear tracks on her cheeks catching the harsh light. There was something different about Elena tonight, an urgency, a desperate hope that seemed to radiate from her very being. What exactly did she say? Catherine asked, though part of her already knew the answer would change everything. She said. Reynolds paused, glancing around as if the walls might be listening. She said she needs to confess something before she dies. Something about her final request. She wants to see the Virgin Mary, sister. She believes Mary will come to her if you're there to witness it. The corridor suddenly felt colder, and Catherine noticed that even the fluorescent lights seemed to dim slightly. In all her years of ministering to the condemned, she had never heard such a specific, impossible request spoken with such quiet certainty. What secrets had Elena been carrying all these years? And why did Catherine feel, deep in her bones, that tonight would test everything she believed about mercy, justice, and miracles? What do you think Elena is hiding that she's never told anyone? Have you ever had a moment where you felt something miraculous was about to happen? Share your thoughts below. I'd love to hear about times when you sensed something extraordinary was approaching. Catherine entered the cell with the practiced quiet of someone who had walked alongside the condemned for decades. Elena looked up, her eyes red-rimmed but strangely luminous in the artificial light. There was something about her gaze tonight, a clarity that hadn't been there during their previous visits, as if layers of pretense had finally been stripped away. You came, Elena whispered, her voice carrying a mixture of relief and desperation. I wasn't sure. After everything I've put you through, all the lies. I'm here, Catherine said simply, settling into the plastic chair across from Elena's cot. She had learned long ago that sometimes the most powerful ministry happened in silence, in simply bearing witness to another's pain. Elena's hands trembled as she reached under her thin mattress, pulling out a small, worn photograph. The edges were soft from countless touches, and Catherine could see it had been folded and unfolded hundreds of times. This is Maria, Elena said, her voice breaking slightly. My daughter. She's 9 now, was 6 when I was arrested. Catherine's breath caught. In all their sessions together, Elena had never mentioned a child. The case files, the media coverage, the trial transcripts. None of them had ever referenced a daughter. She lives with my sister Rosa in El Salvador, Elena continued, studying Catherine's face for any sign of judgment. Rosa doesn't know what happened here. Maria thinks her mama is working far away to save money for them. She writes me letters through Rosa, but Rosa doesn't send them. Rosa thinks it's better if Maria forgets me. The weight of this revelation settled between them like a stone. Catherine understood now why Elena's eyes always held such profound sorrow. It wasn't just facing death that tormented her, It was leaving behind a child who didn't even know her mother was dying. Why didn't you tell anyone? Catherine asked gently. The lawyers, the appeals court. A child changes everything, Elena. Public opinion, sentencing considerations. Elena shook her head, clutching the photograph to her chest. Because I'm guilty, sister. Not of what they convicted me for, but of something else. Something worse. Her voice dropped to barely above a whisper. I let an innocent man die to protect my child. And now I need to tell the truth before I face judgment. The fluorescent light flickered, casting shifting shadows across Elena's face. Catherine noticed that despite her confession of guilt, there was something different about Elena tonight. A peace that seemed at odds with her circumstances. It was as if finally speaking this truth had lifted a weight she'd been carrying for years. The Virgin Mary, Catherine said carefully. You believe she'll come to you tonight? Elena nodded, her eyes growing distant. When I was 7, living in my grandmother's village, I saw her. During the worst drought in 50 years, when the crops were dying and people were leaving for the cities. She appeared to me by the old well, and the next morning, water was flowing again. Elena's voice grew stronger with each word. Everyone said it was a child's imagination, but I knew. I felt her love, her sadness for our suffering. And lately I feel her near me again. Catherine studied the young woman before her, seeing layers she had never noticed before. Elena wasn't just another condemned prisoner. She was a mother carrying impossible secrets, a daughter of faith wrestling with divine mysteries, and someone who believed, truly believed, that mercy could still find her even in this concrete tomb. But what truth was Elena hiding that could change everything? And why did Catherine suddenly feel as though unseen eyes were watching them both? The steel door clanged open with a finality that made both women jump. Warden Patricia Hawkins stepped inside, her usually stern expression softened by something Catherine couldn't quite identify. Uncertainty, perhaps, or reluctant compassion. Ms. Vasquez, the warden began, her voice carefully controlled. Your attorney has filed an emergency appeal based on new evidence. The execution has been postponed for 72 hours. Elena's photograph fluttered to the floor as her hands flew to cover her mouth. Catherine felt her own heart skip. In 37 years of prison ministry, she had seen stays of execution, but never one filed this close to midnight with such mysterious timing. New evidence? Catherine asked, though something in the warden's eyes suggested there was more to this story. Warden Hawkins hesitated, glancing between Elena and Catherine. A man named Father Miguel Santos from El Salvador arrived at the prison 2 hours ago. He claims to have information that could exonerate Ms. Vasquez. He's requesting immediate audience with both of you. Elena went completely still, the color draining from her face. Father Miguel, she whispered. That's impossible. He died 3 years ago. I attended his funeral mass before my trial. The fluorescent light above them flickered more intensely now, and Catherine noticed that the temperature in the small cell seemed to have dropped several degrees. The hair on her arms stood up as an inexplicable energy filled the space between them. Ma'am, Warden Hawkins said carefully. The man waiting in the conference room has proper identification, travel documents from San Salvador dated yesterday, and he knows details about your case that were never made public. Details that match what he claims happened in El Salvador during your daughter's. Stop, Elena said, her voice sharp with panic. Please, don't say it in front of Sister Catherine. Not yet. Not until I can explain properly. But Catherine was no longer listening to their words. Something extraordinary was happening in the cell, a presence that seemed to fill every corner with warmth despite the cold air, a light that had nothing to do with the harsh fluorescence above. She watched in amazement as Elena's photograph, which had fallen face down on the concrete floor, began to glow with a soft, golden radiance. Elena saw it too and dropped to her knees, her hands clasped in prayer. She's here. Elena breathed, tears streaming down her face. I can feel her. Sister Catherine, can you feel her presence? Catherine's rational mind tried to process what she was witnessing, but her heart recognized something her theology had always taught, but never quite believed possible in such a tangible way. The very air seemed to shimmer around them, and she could swear she heard the faint sound of singing, not from the corridor outside, but from somewhere beyond the physical world entirely. Warden, Catherine said, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. Bring Father Miguel here. Now. Whatever Elena needs to confess, whatever truth needs to be told, it needs to happen in this room, in this moment. Elena looked up at Catherine with eyes that now blazed with a mixture of terror and hope. You believe me, don't you? About the Virgin Mary? Before Catherine could answer, the photograph on the floor began to rise, lifting slowly into the air until it hovered at eye level between them. The image of little Maria seemed to move within the frame, her painted smile growing wider, her dark eyes sparkling with life. Warden Hawkins stumbled backward, her hand reaching for the door frame. What in God's name? Exactly, Elena whispered, reaching toward the floating photograph with trembling fingers. In God's name. She's answering my final request, but not the way I expected. She's not just coming to me. She's bringing the truth with her. What connection did Father Miguel have to Elena's case? And how could a dead priest hold the key to her freedom? More importantly, what truth was about to be revealed that would shake everyone's understanding of justice, mercy, and the impossible? Father Miguel Santos entered the cell with the quiet dignity of a man who had spent decades ministering to the forgotten and forsaken. He was older than Elena remembered, silver threading through his dark hair, deeper lines around his eyes. But his presence carried the same gentle authority that had comforted her through her childhood confessions. Mija, he said softly, using the endearment that had always made Elena feel like she mattered. It's time to tell them what really happened to Maria. Elena's composure cracked, and she pressed her back against the cell wall as if trying to disappear into the concrete. You don't understand, Padre. If I tell them the truth, they'll take her away from Rosa. They'll put her in the system, and she'll never understand why her mother destroyed everything. The photograph still hovered in the air between them, casting its impossible golden glow across their faces. Catherine noticed that Warden Hawkins had quietly called for additional security but hadn't left the cell. Whatever was happening here had captured them all in its supernatural web. Elena, Catherine said gently, what happened to Maria that connects to your conviction? Father Miguel answered instead, his voice heavy with the weight of carried secrets. Maria was kidnapped 3 years ago in San Salvador. Elena received a ransom demand, not for money, but for her silence about something she witnessed here in the United States. Elena's legs gave out, and she slid down the wall to sit on the cold floor. The night they say I killed that businessman, Marcus Webb, I didn't kill him, but I saw who did. I saw everything. Catherine's pulse quickened. Marcus Webb had been a prominent developer whose murder had shocked the community. Elena had been found at the scene with blood on her clothes and no alibi, her claims of innocence dismissed as desperate lies. The kidnappers knew you witnessed the murder? Warden Hawkins asked, her professional skepticism warring with the undeniable strangeness surrounding them. They knew because one of them was there that night, Elena whispered. Detective Raymond Torres. He killed Marcus Webb over a land development deal gone wrong. When they found me hiding in the warehouse, Torres made me a deal. Keep quiet about what I saw, and Maria would be safe. Speak up, and my daughter would disappear forever. Father Miguel pulled out a worn manila envelope from his jacket. The kidnappers made a mistake, Mija. They trusted their accomplice in El Salvador to kill Maria after Elena's trial ended. But that man, he couldn't murder a child. Instead, he came to me, confessed everything, and died from the guilt and fear. Before he passed, he gave me evidence, photographs, recordings, bank transfers connecting Detective Torres to the Webb murder and the kidnapping ring. Catherine felt the room spinning around her. Elena, you chose prison and death row to save your daughter's life. What would you have done? Elena asked, tears streaming down her face. Let them kill my baby to save myself? I thought if I died quietly, they'd let Rosa keep raising Maria in peace. She'd never have to know what happened to her mother. The photograph suddenly moved, floating toward Catherine until it hovered directly in front of her face. In the golden light, she could see details that shouldn't have been possible in a simple snapshot. Maria's eyes seemed to look directly at her, full of intelligence and love, and Catherine could swear she heard a child's voice whisper, "Save my mama." The Virgin Mary, Catherine breathed, understanding flooding through her. She's not just answering your prayer for a visitation. She's orchestrating your salvation. Father Miguel nodded solemnly. I was scheduled to testify at Elena's original trial, but I died of a heart attack the night before. Except, He paused, touching his chest where Catherine could see a faint scar beneath his clerical collar. I remember darkness, then light, then a woman in blue telling me there was still work to do. The next thing I knew, I was waking up in the morgue 3 days later. The funeral they held was for an empty coffin. Warden Hawkins sank into the plastic chair, her face pale. This is impossible. People don't come back from the dead to solve criminal cases. Don't they? Elena asked, looking directly at the hovering photograph of her daughter. Padre, is Maria? Maria is safe, Father Miguel assured her. She's with Rosa, and she's been praying for you every night. She lights a candle to the Virgin Mary and asks her to protect her mama, who's working so far away. The cell fell silent except for the humming fluorescent lights and the almost musical quality of the air around the glowing photograph. Catherine realized that everything, Elena's conviction, Father Miguel's miraculous return, even her own presence here tonight, had been orchestrated by forces far beyond their understanding. But how would they prove Elena's innocence when the evidence came from a supposedly dead priest? And what would Detective Torres do when he learned his carefully constructed cover-up was about to crumble? The photograph suddenly dropped to the floor with a sharp crack that echoed through the cell like a gunshot. In the abrupt silence that followed, they could hear running footsteps in the corridor outside, urgent voices, and the unmistakable sound of the prison's emergency alarm system beginning to wail. Warden Hawkins to the main gate immediately crackled over the intercom. Detective Torres is here demanding to see the Vasquez prisoner. He claims there's been a security breach. Elena's face went white as death. He knows, she whispered. Somehow he knows that Father Miguel is here. Catherine felt ice flooding her veins as the pieces clicked into place. Elena, how many people knew about tonight's execution timing? Just the prison staff, my lawyer, and... Elena's eyes widened in horror. And Detective Torres. He requested to be notified when I died. Said he wanted to make sure justice was served. Father Miguel was already moving toward his envelope of evidence, but Warden Hawkins held up a hand to stop him. Wait. If Torres is here, if he somehow knows about this meeting, then we're not just dealing with a corrupt cop. We're dealing with someone who's been monitoring this prison, possibly monitoring all of you. The lights flickered again, but this time it wasn't supernatural. It was the emergency power system kicking in as the prison went into lockdown mode. Through the small window in the cell door, they could see officers running past, their faces grim with purpose. There's something else, Elena said, her voice barely audible above the alarms. Something I never told anyone, not even you, Padre. Father Miguel looked at her with concern. Mija, what else could there be? The night Marcus Webb died. I wasn't just a witness. Elena's words came out in a rush, as if she feared losing her courage. I was there because Webb had contacted me. He wanted to confess something about Detective Torres, about other murders, about a whole network of corruption that went all the way up to the mayor's office. Catherine's breath caught. You were meeting Webb as a witness to his confession? I was a court reporter before Maria was born, Elena explained. Webb specifically requested me because he knew my reputation for accuracy and discretion. He said Torres had been blackmailing him for years, forcing him to approve development projects that displaced poor families. When Webb finally decided to go to the FBI, Torres killed him. The sound of boots stomping down the corridor grew louder. Father Miguel quickly pressed the envelope into Catherine's hands. Sister, there's something else you need to know. The Virgin Mary, she didn't just send me back to save Elena. She showed me something else, something about you. About me? Catherine's hands trembled as she held the evidence that could free an innocent woman. Your brother Michael, Father Miguel said urgently. The police officer who died in the line of duty 15 years ago. He didn't die randomly, Catherine. He was killed because he was investigating the same corruption network that Elena stumbled into. Torres killed your brother. The cell seemed to spin around Catherine as this revelation hit her like a physical blow. Michael had been her younger brother, her reason for entering religious service, her inspiration for working with prisoners seeking redemption. His death had been ruled a gang-related shooting during a routine traffic stop, but it had never made sense to her family. No, she whispered, but even as she spoke, memories began shifting into new patterns. Michael's strange behavior in the weeks before his death, his cryptic phone calls about cleaning up the department, his request that she pray for his protection against evil in uniform. Elena reached out and took Catherine's free hand. Sister, I'm so sorry. If I had been brave enough to speak up 3 years ago, my brother would still be alive, Catherine finished, the truth settling over her like a lead blanket. And you would never have gone to prison. The cell door burst open, and Detective Raymond Torres stepped inside, his hand resting on his service weapon. He was a tall man with graying hair and cold blue eyes that Catherine now realized she had seen before, at Michael's funeral, offering condolences and promising to find his killer. Well, Torres said, his voice carrying a casual menace that made the air in the small space feel poisonous. Isn't this a touching reunion? The dead priest, the lying murderer, the naive nun, and the warden who's about to have a very bad night. Father Miguel stepped protectively in front of Elena. Detective, it's over. We have evidence of everything. The Webb murder, the kidnapping, the cover-up. Torres laughed, a sound devoid of any warmth. Evidence from a dead man. Good luck with that in court, Padre. Besides, I don't think any of you will be around to testify. But as Torres spoke, something extraordinary began to happen. The photograph on the floor started glowing again, brighter than before, and the temperature in the cell dropped so dramatically that their breath began misting in the air. A presence filled the room, not gentle this time, but fierce and protective, like a mother defending her children. You killed my brother, Catherine said, her voice steady despite the supernatural energy swirling around them. You've destroyed families, murdered innocent people, and corrupted everything you were sworn to protect. Torres' confident expression faltered as he noticed the otherworldly light emanating from the photograph. What kind of trick is this? Elena stood up slowly, her fear transformed into something stronger. It's not a trick, Detective. It's justice. And she's been waiting 3 years for this moment. What power could possibly protect them against an armed, desperate killer? And how would divine intervention manifest itself in a maximum security prison where Torres controlled every exit? Have you ever experienced a moment where you felt like justice was finally catching up to someone who seemed untouchable? What do you think happens when truth and corruption collide? Share your thoughts. I'd love to hear about times when you've seen the truth finally win out. Torres drew his weapon with practiced efficiency, the metallic click echoing in the small cell like a death knell. The supernatural light from the photograph flickered and dimmed, as if even divine intervention could be intimidated by human violence. Everyone against the back wall. Now, Torres' voice carried the authority of 15 years in law enforcement, but Catherine could see sweat beading on his forehead despite the supernatural chill in the air. Warden, call off the lockdown. Tell your guards this was a false alarm. I can't do that, Warden Hawkins said, her voice shaking but resolute. There are protocols. There are protocols for dead wardens too. Torres snapped, adjusting his aim toward her. You have 30 seconds to make that call. Father Miguel stepped forward, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. Detective, killing us won't solve your problem. There are copies of the evidence. People who know the truth. Copies. Torres laughed bitterly. You mean these? He pulled out a cell phone and showed them a series of text messages. Your contact in El Salvador is dead, Padre. Has been for the past 6 hours. Funny thing about resurrection miracles, they don't last long when they threaten the wrong people. Elena collapsed against the wall as if physically struck. No, she whispered. Father Miguel, you said you had the evidence secured. I did, Father Miguel replied, but uncertainty crept into his voice for the first time. Sister Esperanza was supposed to deliver copies to the FBI field office in San Salvador this morning. Torres' smile was cold as winter. Sister Esperanza had a tragic accident on her way to the FBI. Car went off a mountain road. These things happen in developing countries. He gestured with his weapon toward the envelope still clutched in Catherine's hands. That's the only remaining evidence, and once it's gone, you'll kill us anyway, Catherine said quietly. You killed Michael because he was getting too close to the truth. You killed Marcus Webb because he was going to expose you. You've probably killed dozens of people over the years. Your brother was particularly stubborn, Torres admitted with casual cruelty. Kept pushing, kept asking questions. Even after I warned him to back off. Some people just don't know when to quit. The photograph on the floor suddenly cracked down the middle with a sound like breaking glass. Elena cried out as if she'd been physically wounded, dropping to her knees beside the damaged image of her daughter. Maria, she sobbed, touching the cracked surface. I'm so sorry, baby. Mama tried to save you, but I failed. Warden Hawkins slowly reached for her radio, her face resigned. This is Warden Hawkins. Stand down from lockdown procedures. We have the situation under control. Catherine watched in horror as their last hope for rescue evaporated with those words. Torres nodded approvingly as the alarm systems fell silent, leaving them in the terrible quiet of the fluorescent-lit cell. Much better, Torres said. Now, here's what's going to happen. Elena is going to have a tragic accident while being transferred back to her cell. Very common in maximum security prisons. Inmates sometimes attack guards. Guards have to defend themselves. Tragic, but necessary. And us? Father Miguel asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. Well, you're already supposed to be dead, Padre. I'm just correcting an administrative error. As for Sister Catherine and the warden, well, you were both unfortunate witnesses to Elena's violent outburst. Heroes, really, trying to protect staff during a dangerous situation. Elena looked up from the cracked photograph, her eyes red with tears, but blazing with a fury Catherine had never seen before. You destroyed everything. My daughter will grow up thinking her mother was a murderer. Your corruption has poisoned everything it touched. Your daughter won't grow up at all, Torres said with matter-of-fact brutality. Did you really think I'd leave loose ends? The arrangements in El Salvador were quite thorough. The words hit Elena like physical blows, and she doubled over as if she'd been shot. Catherine felt her own heart breaking as she watched a mother's soul shatter in real time. Father Miguel's face went white. Maria, you didn't. The kid and her aunt had an unfortunate encounter with some very bad people. Torres shrugged. Gang violence is terrible in Central America. So unpredictable. The photograph on the floor cracked further, its golden light fading to barely a glimmer. Elena's sobs echoed off the concrete walls, a sound of such profound grief that even Torres looked uncomfortable. Catherine realized that everything they had hoped for, everything they had believed about justice and divine intervention, was crumbling around them. The evidence would be destroyed, they would all die, and a corrupt system would continue destroying innocent lives. She's gone, Elena whispered, staring at the nearly dark photograph. My baby is gone, and it's all my fault. I thought silence would save her, but I just delayed her death by 3 years. In the darkest hour, when evil seemed to have triumphed completely, and even divine light was fading, what power could possibly turn the tide? Sometimes the greatest miracles come not from preventing tragedy, but from transforming it into something redemptive. As Elena's sobs filled the cell with unbearable grief, something extraordinary began to happen. The cracked photograph on the floor didn't fade further. Instead, it began to pulse with renewed light, each pulse synchronized with Elena's heartbroken breathing. Catherine knelt beside Elena, placing a protective arm around her shoulders. Elena, look, she whispered urgently. Look at Maria's picture. Through her tears, Elena saw what Catherine had noticed. The cracks in the photograph weren't destroying the image. They were transforming it. Golden light seeped through each fracture like liquid sunlight, and within that radiance, the photograph began to change. That's impossible, Torres muttered, his weapon wavering as he stared at the impossible sight. Photographs don't. But the image was shifting, showing not just Maria's sweet face, but a larger scene. Elena gasped as she recognized her sister Rosa's small house in El Salvador, and there, alive, safe, and kneeling in prayer before a statue of the Virgin Mary, were Rosa and Maria. She's alive, Elena breathed, her tears now flowing with joy rather than grief. Maria's alive. Father Miguel stepped closer, his own eyes filling with wonder. Detective Torres, your contacts lied to you. They took your money but couldn't bring themselves to murder a child and an innocent woman. Torres' confident facade cracked like the photograph had moments before. No, that's impossible. I paid them good money. They sent me proof. They sent you lies, a new voice said from the doorway. Everyone turned to see Officer Reynolds, but he wasn't alone. Behind him stood Agent Sarah Chun from the FBI, along with 2 other federal agents, all wearing bulletproof vests and expressions of grim satisfaction. Detective Raymond Torres, Agent Chun announced, "You're under arrest for the murders of Marcus Webb, Officer Michael Martinez, and conspiracy in the kidnapping of Maria Vasquez." Torres swung his weapon toward the doorway, but his hand was shaking now. This is impossible. How did you? Your dead contacts in El Salvador have been working with us for months, Agent Chun explained calmly. Amazing how cooperative people become when you offer them witness protection instead of prison time. They've been feeding you false information while we built our case. Catherine felt Elena's entire body go limp with relief against her shoulder. Maria is really safe? Elena whispered. Agent Chun nodded. Your daughter and sister are currently under FBI protection. Maria has been asking when her mama will come home from her work trip. She doesn't know about any of this, Elena. As far as she's concerned, you've been working to build a better life for her. The photograph on the floor blazed brighter, and now they could all see what Elena saw. Maria and Rosa lighting candles before the Virgin Mary statue, Rosa's lips moving in prayer, Maria's small hands clasped together as she whispered words of love for her distant mother. But how? Warden Hawkins asked, still trying to process the rapid turn of events. How did you know to be here tonight? Father Miguel smiled, touching the scar on his chest where his heart had stopped 3 years ago. Sometimes the dead don't stay dead when there's still God's work to do. I made contact with the FBI the moment I returned. We've been building this case ever since. Torres was backing against the cell wall now, his weapon trained on Agent Chun. You can't prove anything. It's all testimony from criminals and dead men. Actually, Agent Chun said, pulling out a small recording device, we can prove everything, including your confession tonight about killing Officer Martinez and Marcus Webb. Elena's cell has been monitored by FBI surveillance since Father Miguel first contacted us. Everything you've said in the last hour has been recorded and transmitted to federal prosecutors. The photograph suddenly lifted from the floor again, floating not to Catherine this time, but directly to Elena. As she held it in trembling hands, the image shifted one final time. Now it showed not just Rosa and Maria, but a courtroom scene where Elena walked free, embracing her daughter for the first time in 3 years. It's over, Catherine said, her voice filled with awe and gratitude. Elena, it's really over. Elena looked up at Father Miguel through her tears. Padre, how can I ever thank you? You literally came back from the dead to save me. Father Miguel's expression grew tender and mysterious. Mija, I didn't come back to save you. The Virgin Mary sent me back to save all of us. You, your daughter, Sister Catherine's search for truth about her brother, and even Detective Torres' soul, if he'll accept redemption. Torres' weapon finally dropped as the weight of his situation became clear. My soul, he laughed bitterly. After everything I've done, there's no redemption for someone like me. Elena stood slowly, still holding the glowing photograph of her daughter. She looked at Torres, the man who had stolen 3 years of her life, who had tried to destroy her family, who had murdered her spiritual sister's brother, and spoke words that would echo in all their hearts forever. There's redemption for everyone, detective. Even you. Even after everything you've done, God's mercy is bigger than your sins. The question is whether you're brave enough to accept it. As divine light filled the cell and truth finally emerged triumphant, would Torres find the courage to accept redemption? And what would Elena's reunion with her daughter look like after 3 years of believing sacrifice was her only option? The cell transformed into something that defied both physics and explanation. The harsh fluorescent lights dimmed to a gentle glow while a warm, golden radiance emanated from every surface. Even the concrete walls seemed to breathe with supernatural peace. Agent Chun and her team stood transfixed as they witnessed something that would challenge their understanding of reality forever. Detective Torres slowly lowered his weapon to the floor, his hands shaking not with fear now, but with something deeper, the trembling of a soul recognizing its own darkness for the first time in decades. I killed a good man, Torres whispered, looking directly at Catherine. Your brother? Michael was trying to save people. He was trying to stop the corruption, and I murdered him for it. How can there be forgiveness for that? Catherine stepped toward him, and Elena watched in amazement as the nun's face reflected not hatred or vengeance, but profound sorrow mixed with impossible grace. Raymond, Catherine said, using his first name for the first time, my brother became a police officer because he believed in justice. He died because he refused to let evil triumph. If his death leads to your redemption, then his sacrifice means something eternal. The photograph in Elena's hands began to show new images, not just Maria and Rosa, but scenes of what was to come. Elena saw herself walking out of prison, saw Maria running into her arms, saw them building a new life together. But she also saw something unexpected, Torres in a different kind of cell, not as a prisoner consumed by bitterness, but as a man slowly finding peace through genuine repentance. "I can help you," Torres said suddenly, his voice breaking. "The corruption network, it goes deeper than you know. Judges, prosecutors, even some FBI agents. I kept records, insurance policies. I can give you everything." Agent Chin stepped forward cautiously. "Detective, if you're offering cooperation." "I'm offering confession," Torres interrupted, looking at Father Miguel. "Full confession. Every crime, every cover-up, every life I destroyed. I want to make it right, even if it means spending the rest of my life in prison." Father Miguel approached Torres with the gentle authority of someone who had literally walked through death to serve truth. "My son, confession is the beginning of healing, not just for you, but for everyone whose lives you've touched." Elena watched this exchange with wonder. 3 hours ago, she had been preparing to die for crimes she didn't commit, believing her daughter was lost forever. Now she stood witness to the miraculous transformation of the very man who had orchestrated her downfall. "There's something else," Torres said, reaching into his jacket slowly. Agent Chin tensed, but he pulled out only a key ring. Marcus Webb's real will. The one that left everything to a foundation for displaced families. I've kept it hidden for 3 years. And there are bank accounts, Detective Torres offshore accounts, with money from all the bribes and payoffs. It should go to the families we hurt. Warden Hawkins stepped forward, her face still showing shock at everything she'd witnessed. "Elena, I owe you an apology. We all do. The system failed you completely." Elena shook her head, still holding the glowing photograph. "The system failed, yes. But people didn't. Sister Catherine never stopped believing in mercy. Father Miguel defied death itself to bring truth to light. Even you, Warden, opened your heart to witness something impossible tonight." The golden light in the cell began to coalesce, and for one breathtaking moment, they all saw her. The Virgin Mary herself, standing between Elena and Torres, her hands extended in blessing over both the innocent and the guilty. Her presence was overwhelming in its compassion, terrifying in its power, and absolute in its message. Mercy was available to all, but justice would also be served. When the vision faded, leaving them in the gentle glow of ordinary prison lighting, they found that the photograph in Elena's hands had changed one final time. Now it showed not just Maria waiting in El Salvador, but a complete family portrait. Elena, Maria, Rosa, and surprisingly, a new addition, a small boy with Torres eyes, standing beside an older woman who could only be Torres' mother. "You have a son," Elena said to Torres, her voice filled with gentle wonder. "He doesn't know what his father became." Torres' composure finally broke completely, and he fell to his knees, sobbing. "David, he's 8. Lives with my mother in Phoenix. I haven't seen him in 2 years because I was afraid he'd see the evil in me." Father Miguel knelt beside Torres, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Redemption doesn't erase the consequences of our actions, Raymond, but it does give us the chance to become the fathers, the men, the human beings God created us to be." Agent Chin stepped forward with handcuffs, but her movements were respectful rather than harsh. "Detective Torres, I'm placing you under arrest. But I want you to know, your cooperation tonight will be noted. Your willingness to make amends will matter." As the cuffs clicked into place, Torres looked up at Elena one last time. "Can you forgive me? After everything I've stolen from you, all the pain I've caused." Elena approached him, still holding the photograph that had somehow orchestrated this entire miraculous evening. She leaned down and spoke words that seemed to carry the weight of divine authority. "Raymond, I forgive you completely. Not because you deserve it, but because forgiveness is the only thing powerful enough to transform hatred into healing. Go and sin no more." As Torres was led away to face earthly justice tempered by divine mercy, Elena prepared for the reunion she had never dared hope for. But what would it mean to rebuild a life after 3 years of believing love required ultimate sacrifice? 3 months later, San Salvador, El Salvador. The morning sun painted Rosa's small courtyard in shades of gold and amber as Elena knelt in the garden, her hands deep in the rich earth, planting marigolds alongside her daughter. Maria's laughter filled the air like music as she discovered a family of ladybugs hiding beneath a broad leaf. "Mama, do you think the Virgin Mary likes flowers?" Maria asked, her dark eyes sparkling with the innocent wisdom that had sustained Elena through the darkest years of her life. "I think she loves anything that grows from love, Mija," Elena replied, brushing a streak of soil from Maria's cheek. "Just like I love watching you grow." The past 3 months had been a whirlwind of legal proceedings, media attention, and the slow, beautiful work of rebuilding a relationship with her daughter. Maria had adapted to having her mother home with the resilience of childhood, though she sometimes asked thoughtful questions about why Mama had been away so long on her work trip. Rosa emerged from the house carrying a tray of fresh horchata, her face bearing the peaceful expression of someone whose prayers had been answered beyond her wildest hopes. "Elena, you have visitors," she announced with a knowing smile. Through the garden gate came Sister Catherine, looking more relaxed than Elena had ever seen her. Beside her walked an unexpected but welcome figure. Father Miguel, now officially reassigned to minister in El Salvador, his resurrection having been quietly accepted by church authorities as one of God's mysterious works. "Sister Catherine," Maria exclaimed, running to embrace the nun who had become like family to them. "Did you bring pictures of the big church in America?" Catherine laughed, pulling out her phone to show Maria photos of the cathedral where she now worked. After the events at the prison, Catherine had requested a transfer to a parish focused on criminal justice reform and family reunification. Her work with Elena had ignited a passion for helping other families torn apart by systemic failures. "How are you settling in, Padre?" Elena asked Father Miguel as Maria showed Catherine her growing collection of butterflies in the garden. "Like I never left," Father Miguel replied, his eyes twinkling with the contentment of a man who had found his true purpose. "Though I must admit, having memories of both heaven and earth makes for very interesting homilies." Rosa joined their circle, pouring horchata for everyone. "Elena received a letter yesterday," she announced, "from that detective in America." Elena's expression grew thoughtful as she pulled out a carefully folded piece of paper. "Raymond Torres," she explained to Catherine and Father Miguel. "He's been writing every week from federal prison." "How is he adjusting?" Catherine asked. She had maintained correspondence with Torres' mother, helping to facilitate visits with his son David. "Better than anyone expected," Elena replied. "He's teaching literacy classes to other inmates and working with federal prosecutors to dismantle the entire corruption network. 17 officials have been arrested so far, and the families affected by the land development schemes are receiving compensation." Maria looked up from her butterfly observation. "Mama, is that the man who made the mistake about you?" Elena smiled at her daughter's gentle way of understanding complex adult realities. "Yes, Mija. But people can change when they choose to do the right thing, even after making terrible mistakes. Like when I broke Rosa's vase and then helped her glue it back together?" Maria asked. "Exactly like that," Father Miguel said, his voice warm with approval. "Sometimes broken things become more beautiful when they're healed with love." Catherine pulled out her own phone and showed them a recent photo, Torres in his prison uniform, standing beside his son David during a family visit. Both were smiling, and David's hand rested trustingly in his father's. "His son is doing well," Catherine reported. "David's in counseling, and Torres' mother says he's finally asking questions about his father. Good questions about forgiveness and second chances." Elena studied the photo, marveling at how different Torres looked. The harsh lines of corruption and violence had softened into something approaching peace. It's amazing what truth can do, even when it comes at such a cost. A butterfly landed on Maria's outstretched finger, and she held perfectly still, her face radiant with wonder. "Mama, look. It chose me." Elena watched her daughter with the butterfly and felt the familiar flutter of the miraculous in her chest. Every day brought small wonders. Maria's laughter, Rosa's contentment, the slowly healing relationship between mother and child, and the knowledge that their story had helped transform an entire system of injustice. "I've been thinking," Elena said to her guests, "about starting a foundation for families separated by wrongful imprisonment. Rosa has agreed to help, and we have that money from Torres' restitution fund." Catherine's eyes lit up with excitement. "Elena, that's wonderful. I know several organizations in the States that would love to partner with you. Father Miguel nodded approvingly. The Virgin Mary didn't save you just for your own sake, Mija. She saved you to save others. As the afternoon sun began to paint longer shadows across the courtyard, Maria came running over with her hands cupped carefully. I have a present for everyone, she announced. She opened her small hands to reveal 4 tiny white flowers, each perfect in its simplicity. I found them growing by the wall where Mama and I pray to the Virgin Mary every morning. One for each of you, because you're all part of our family now. Elena accepted her flower with tears in her eyes, watching as Maria distributed the others with the serious importance of a child sharing treasure. These people, Catherine seeking justice for her brother's memory, Father Miguel serving from beyond death itself, Rosa offering unconditional love. They had all been woven together by forces far greater than coincidence. To family, Elena said, raising her glass of horchata in a toast. Not just the family we're born into, but the family that chooses us, saves us, and loves us through impossible circumstances. To miracles, Catherine added, thinking of her brother's vindication and Torres' redemption. To second chances, Rosa contributed, squeezing Elena's hand. To the power of truth, Father Miguel concluded, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had literally died and lived to serve it. And Maria, not understanding all the adult complexities but feeling the love that surrounded her, simply said, to Mama being home. As the sun set over El Salvador, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Elena felt the profound peace that comes from knowing that love, divine and human, had triumphed over the darkest forces that had tried to destroy her family. The Virgin Mary's final answer to her prayer hadn't been simply to appear, but to orchestrate a transformation so complete that even her enemies had become part of the redemption story. In the distance, church bells began to ring for evening vespers, and Elena whispered a prayer of gratitude for the impossible made manifest, for the dead restored to life, for the innocent vindicated, and for the guilty given the chance to choose love over darkness. The photograph of Maria that had once cracked under the weight of despair now sat framed on Rosa's mantle, whole and glowing in the candlelight, a permanent reminder that even broken things can be made more beautiful when touched by grace. Elena's story reminds us that sometimes the greatest miracles aren't the supernatural events themselves, but the human choices to forgive, to seek truth, and to believe that love ultimately triumphs over evil. Through divine intervention and human courage, a mother's sacrifice became the catalyst for justice, redemption, and the healing of an entire community. What moments in your own life have shown you that love is more powerful than any darkness trying to destroy it? How do you think forgiveness can transform both the forgiver and the forgiven? Share your thoughts about second chances and the miracles that happen when we choose hope over despair. I'd love to hear your stories of redemption and healing.
Thank you so much for watching this story all the way to the end. If you enjoyed this one, then you'll absolutely love the next. It's even crazier and more captivating than you can imagine. So go ahead and click the video showing right here on your screen, and I'll see you in the next story.